pleasure to welcome you to our event today. I am Seye Aina. I am the immediate past chair of BNLF, and I am the head of the BNLF Women's Network. The network was founded in 2018, and we've been going on since. This is our first event for International Day of the Girl, and we thought we'd come with the topic, empowering young girls and women. And International Day of the Girl is marked on the 11th of October each year. The theme this year is My Voice Equals Future. And it's been 25 years since the Beijing Declaration. So we're really proud to be bringing this to you. And this event is supported by WorldRemit. So we've got a wonderful set of speakers, and I'm really, really proud because it was last minute that everybody signed up, but you know, really glad to get a group of distinguished women. So without further ado, because it's a really tight program, I'll just take you through what we're going to be dealing with this evening. Our speakers are Osai Ojigho, and she is the Nigeria Country Director of Amnesty International. She'll be talking about discrimination and gender-based violence. We have Rhiana Spring, the legal officer of Africa Union and the CEO of Kona Club Limited. And she will be talking about women's rights are human rights. Then we have Her Excellency Claire Island, the Australian High Commissioner, Abuja, Nigeria. And she will be talking about women in politics. And then we have Morayo Fagborun Bennett, who's a barrister at Hardwicke Chambers and is the Deputy District Judge. She's the Deputy District Judge, recently appointed. And she will be dealing with imposter syndrome and the role of positive action in climbing the ladder of success. Then we'll have an opportunity to ask one or two questions, and then we'll wrap it up. So we've got quite a tight program, and it's going to be really, really interesting. So we actually are going to kick off now. I don't really want to waste too much time. So I'm just going to start off now, and I'm going to introduce our first speaker. So let me say a few words about Osai Ojigho. This Osai Ojigho is a lawyer, gender and equality advocate, and human rights expert with a special interest in the African human rights system. Currently, she is the country director of Amnesty International, Nigeria. And prior to joining Amnesty International, she served in various roles in Oxfam, including as a Pan-African director of Oxfam in the UK. She was the coalition coordinator of State of the Union Coalition, a human rights observer to the African Union mission to Mali, and the Sahel and Deputy Executive Director of Alliances for Africa. She is well-traveled and widely published, contributing to various publications, including the Commonwealth Law Journal. So we're just going to post in the chat about her because we haven't really got enough time to go through everybody's profile, but we'll post it in the chat. And so, Osai Ojigho, if you will unmute, it's over to you now.
Thank you so much. I was like, oh, when is she gonna stop? We're now blushing and getting the drum roll, like da, 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 what's happening. So really, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this and also to share, and also for the excellent co-panelists that are joining us this evening. I think it's going to be a really good conversation, and I hope we'll have time to interact afterwards. So I would be speaking a bit more about discrimination and gender-based violence. And I've kind of themed my sharing today as aspiration versus perspiration. So the theme for this year's commemoration of International Day of the Girl is My Voice, Our Equal Future. It is truly relevant in these times for two reasons. The first is the Me Too movement, and the second is the intergenerational discussions which are happening now within feminist circles. I would also want to situate the conversations today around the Beijing +25 and ask us to look back at 25 years of development around gender equality and women's rights following the 1995 Fourth World Conference on Women and the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. The coronavirus pandemic prevented several of us from celebrating this key milestone in a physical venue earlier in the year. It is also quite instructive that the impact of COVID-19 has also led to the use of today's meeting in a virtual space. One of the 12 Beijing platform's critical areas of concern is ending violence against women and girls. Violence against women continues to be an obstacle to achieving equality, development, peace, as well as to the fulfillment of women and girls' human rights. One definition of violence against women that I like a lot is the definition in the Maputo Protocol. This is the protocol to the African Charter on the rights, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, on the rights of women in Africa. And it defines violence against women as all acts perpetrated against women which cause or could cause them physical, sexual, psychological, and economic harm, including the threat to take such acts or to undertake the imposition of arbitrary restrictions on or deprivation of fundamental freedoms in private or public life, in peacetime and during situations of armed conflicts or of war. Violence against women is the most common form of gender-based violence, but it's really important that we frame it around gender rather than just call it violence against women. And this is because I believe, and for many that have pushed this argument, that the root cause of the violence that many women and girls face is as a result of their gender. And this is based on gender inequality and discrimination, because if you discriminate against someone, then it means that whatever happens to them, the state feels they are not in a position to respond. And so we see this discrimination both in law and in practice, both at home, in private spaces, and in public spaces and at work. I would like to also emphasize, especially because we're doing this talk in terms of the commemoration of the International Day of the Girl, that violence against women changes depending on the life cycle, the stage women and girls are in at any given time. And just to give an idea, in some countries of the world, you find that before even a child is born, pre-birth, we have sex-selective abortion. This was a common cause of concern in China when they had the one-child rule per family. Infancy, at infancy, one of the biggest issues then comes female infanticide and neglect. This is common in places where people feel they have too many children, and oftentimes they don't want a girl child, or like in sad cases as we've seen in India, where girls might be killed because they are worried about the dowry that needs to be paid when she needs to be married off. Then at childhood, and this is especially true for many of us in the African continent, female genital mutilation is usually done then, whereby girls are exposed to harmful traditional practices, and despite various health concerns about this, it continues to be a big issue. Then at adolescence, this is where we are beginning to also see the impact in the larger world in terms of the trafficking of women, but particularly adolescent women are targeted, and we also have the issues of forced early marriage and rape. So going on reproductive age, we look at things around sexual assault, trafficking as well, honor killing, And then for the elderly, something that we've seen in some communities here in Africa and elsewhere is also this idea of forgetting our elders and widow abuse. So when you look at the cycle of violence that women undergo, you begin to ask yourself, what does it mean for girls in school, girls at home, women in the workplace, and women at home? And I would like to state that there are various laws. So since Beijing, many countries have several laws around the issues of gender-based violence, and they have the provision of gender equality and prohibit discrimination against women in their constitutions and in their laws. Yet, COVID-19 has also shown us that many of the cases that we've seen during the lockdown, especially domestic violence cases, was as a result of the inability of the state to provide sufficient services for women who are victims or survivors of domestic violence, and also for those who are victims of rape. And I want to bring it down a little bit closer to those within the legal profession, because when we talk about defending women and bringing cases to court on the basis of that there's been a breach due to violence or due to discrimination, we often look to lawyers to help, to assist, to ensure that justice can be served. But an area that people are not also quite aware of is the fact that even female lawyers themselves do suffer discrimination in the profession and also suffer violence, most commonly sexual harassment in the workplace. I would now like to share some experiences of cases that I've been involved in or worked with other groups on around how the law has been used to explain the existence of a human rights violation with regards to discrimination and gender-based violence, and why this is really important even as we begin to encourage girls to aspire to be better leaders, to achieve their dreams, that they can be anything they want to be, but also mindful that as long as there are discriminatory practices which allow violence to permeate all aspects of society, this would ensure that a lot of women would actually be perspiring rather than aspiring. So one such case is the Dorothy Njemanze versus the Federal Republic of Nigeria, which came up in 2014 before the ECOWAS Community Court of Justice. In that case, this will be familiar to many people who live in Nigeria, there was a reported issue about women being picked on the streets of Abuja and accused of being sex workers, and that the Abuja Environmental Agency felt that they were ridding the streets of Abuja of sex workers. But really what they were doing was they were targeting young women who were found late at night, and they could be returning back home from school, they could be going to work, and in any case, they could be having a nice time like people want to do after you've been at work or at school all day. And that it was actually an extortion ring in order to threaten these women to pay illegal fees to get themselves released, or they were threatened to be charged to magistrates' courts the next day in order to face even stiffer punishment. So Dorothy Njemanze and a few other women decided to come together to challenge this practice because they had been victims. They had been beaten, they've been assaulted, they've been labeled, they've been called all kinds of names. So before the ECOWAS court, the way the case was presented was the violence that the women experienced was specific to the female gender, because no men were ever picked and no men were ever accused of being a sex worker or participating or buying services from a sex worker. And that the real reason why this occurred was because they were discriminated against. And that when they complained about these acts to the relevant government agencies, they failed to act because they were women. So you see that in a way, we cannot really divorce the issue of discrimination and violence against women, especially when it occurs in the public sphere, because there was no reason why an agency that has received a complaint should decline to investigate it merely because they were women, and in their head, at that time of the night, no decent woman, in quote, should have been on the streets, and thereby excusing the bad behavior of the state agents who are responsible for those arrests. So let's come back to the current situation. Dorothy Injemanzi and the other women, actually, they won the case. They were given damages. The Nigerian government, till date, the judgment was given in 2017. Till date, the Nigerian government has still not paid that sum of money. But we can see with some of the developments that have happened in Nigeria since that time, that gender-based violence is getting quite a lot of attention. One indirect impact of the Dorothy Injemanzi case has been the fact that women now feel, I can go to court and get judgment. It might take some time, but if I have the right support, it is doable. Yes, they've not gotten compensation, but at least it means that's another phase of fight I need to do. And most recently in Nigeria, the state of emergency GBV was declared. A lot of the governors came out to commit to it, and we hope that they will hold on to that, because one of the recommendations was the passage of the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act across the various states in Nigeria that were yet to do so. And since the state of emergency GBV was declared, we've seen that quite a number of state governments in Nigeria have decided to fast track the passage of that law in their states. So coming back to present day, and what does this mean, especially when we're talking about young girls and about having a voice and about having equal opportunities. It's really key that we're able to give girls confidence, and that girls are courageous enough to speak up whenever they see unfairness, and not just for themselves, but for other girls. And also that they have good examples within the women's movement, but even the larger civil society, in order for them to engage and reach their fullest potential. And an understanding of how violence can actually be an obstacle, and how they can use the current trends that are occurring now to address specific issues that makes girls feel unsafe in school or in the workplace or at home. And that the lawyers who would be handling these cases are better equipped in order to respond. And the only way we can do this is if we continue to share our experiences and how we've succeeded in the spaces we're in, and to ensure that justice mechanisms work as at when due. Because like in Dorothy's case, if she didn't have the support from people like us and from organizations who are committed to ensuring that the case could come before a regional court, maybe she would still be advocating for change within the space, and the other women coming after her might find it even more difficult. So for every success, we celebrate it and we acknowledge it. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to share for this particular event, I was also mindful of what is currently happening in Nigeria at this time. We've been, I think this is like the 9th day of protests in the country against a very brutal unit of the police force that has dealt a lot of violations, both both at the level of the community, but the consciousness of the nation. So there's been extrajudicial executions, there's been torture, unlawful arrest, extortion, and also rape. So what has been very instructive and has been a symbol of hope in terms of what are we giving to the next generation of girls and women is the fact that a lot of the protesters are being organized and led by young women too. Oftentimes, we are told that whenever there are protests, women will not participate because they are afraid they are going to be hurt, they are afraid they are going to be injured, and the worst fear most women have is that they are going to be sexually assaulted or raped. But we've seen that they've learned from the experiences that have gone on before because they took certain risk mitigation practices. They don't go out alone, they come together. But most importantly, they've been able to elicit with the other protesters and the young men there that they will not tolerate any abuse, and to get supporters to help them ensure that happens. So it's clear, just even watching the protesters, that if we already have strong messaging, and there are things that led to the strong messaging, strong awareness about why sexual violence and any form of gender-based violence is wrong, and it becomes a mark of dishonor. So the dishonor goes to the perpetrator rather than the victim. We are beginning to see that women's equal participation in even organizing a protest would be protected and would be enhanced. And just to end with one point, that oftentimes the fight that we have in order to stop discriminatory practices, whether it's in culture or at the workplace, is often linked to the perpetrators, but actually is the enablers of those culture that we really should be targeting. The human resources at the workplace, the managers who are like, oh, this is hush hush, we don't want you to talk about it. The bystanders that see a girl being harassed on the street and decides, you know what, this is none of my business, I don't want to get involved. Those people are the targets that we should really be expanding our focus on. And the only way we'll be able to achieve this is if more people acknowledge and realize that when you stand up for justice, when you stand up for fairness and equality, there are results. Because women have been in this protest every single day, and we have not heard a single incident of sexual violence. And with the rising attacks they are facing now, not only from state actors, the law enforcement on the streets, but now we are hearing that non-state actors, thugs have been hired by government sympathizers to attack them. That is our concern now, that the fear of women organizing and using their voice, even in this protest, is being threatened by violence. And we do know that when women are on the streets, one of the usual ways in which women are punished for being visible is to inflict sexual violence on them. So really it's about how can we do better so that the enablers become supporters and the bystanders become protectors, so that we also have not just the fact that women cannot protect themselves, but that it's a community effort that is called to place. Women are demanding a place and a voice in their government, in their workplaces, and they have a right to aspire for greatness. And they don't have to sweat so much in order to achieve that, because it is their right, and they should be given an enabling environment for their talents to come up quite strongly. So thank you. I think I will stop here, and really hoping for very engaged conversations on this topic and others. Thank you.
Osai, that was really fantastic, well-detailed explanation, and thank you for bringing us up to date with your experience and your knowledge. Please, if you have any questions, can you put them in the chat, and we will see what we can get through towards the end. So thank you so much for that, Osai. Thank you very much. So without any further ado, I'm going to go on to the next speaker, who is Rhiana Spring. Rhiana is a legal officer at African Union and CEO of the Kona Club Limited. Her topic today will be on women's rights, our human rights. Just a little bit about Rhiana Spring. She's an award-winning international human rights expert and entrepreneur. As part of the United Nations, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Diverse NGOs, and legal teams, Rhiana has advocated for women and spearheaded multinational human rights projects across 4 continents. She has trained governments across West Africa on human rights, defended survivors of domestic violence in the courts of Argentina, and challenged gender inequalities in businesses in the Philippines. She has been part of teams monitoring and protecting human rights across 13 African countries. In 2020, Rhiana co-founded the company Kona Club Limited. So we're going to put the rest of her profile in the chat. So Rhiana, it's over to you now on the topic of women's rights are human rights.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I'd like to start off my session with a video to quickly challenge your assumptions. So bear with me, hopefully this works while I share my screen. Here we go.
Hi, Erin. Show me what it looks like to run like a girl.
My hair.
Show me what it looks like to fight like a girl. Now throw like a girl.
Aw.
So do you think you just insulted your sister?
No. I mean, yeah, insulted girls, but not my sister.
My name is Dakota, and I'm 10 years old.
Show me what it looks like to run like a girl. Throw like a girl. Fight like a girl. What does it mean to you when I say run like a girl?
It means run fast as you can.
So as you saw in the video, and probably you've also seen in your various legal practices, simple words can have a massive impact on all aspects of life. Just being told that you run like a girl and that means something demeaning, or that means you're less capable, being instilled with something like that when you're so small, it's no wonder that 93% of world leaders are men and 83% of executives globally are men as well. So when we ask the questions, are women's rights human rights? What should be an obvious statement, I mean, we are humans, right? It turns out that probably every woman and girl here with us tonight has already experienced in one way or another that those rights have been violated. They're not as straightforward and given as they should be. How many of you have been judged on what you've been wearing? This is a violation of the freedom of discrimination. How many of you have been addressed or touched inappropriately? This is a violation of the right of the security of the person. Although these rights are guaranteed by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and many other conventions, every single woman has experienced this in their life. And not only sometimes or on an occasion, pretty much every single day. What makes women's rights distinct from human rights is that human rights are slowly but surely getting better, whereas women's rights are getting worse. If we continue on the path that we're on today, we will be living in an equal society in 200 years. This means that your great-great-great-great-granddaughter will finally be treated equally. And I don't know how it is for you, but for me, that's absolutely unacceptable. And this is why we have to change things right now, and all of us together. Effectively ensuring women's rights, however, we need a deep understanding of underlying societal issues and cultures and power relations. This is why I think it's fantastic what BNLF is doing in fostering these intercultural exchanges between Nigerian and British lawyers, because in my experience, you only get to understand your culture properly when in contact with others. Through my career so far, I've been digging for the root cause of evil, trying to look for the cause rather than patching up the symptoms of human rights violations. And there are many. But tonight I want to focus on what we as individuals can do right now when we leave this event tonight to change the world around us. We've seen a shift in our societies from less overt sexism, where we are legally discriminated against based on our sex, to more institutionalized sexism, which can be quite invisible to the naked eye. So with this shift, we need a new set of tools, and this is what I propose. We need to believe, empower, and connect. Believe in our capabilities, and this is something I tell women in my personal life as well as in my company every day. You need to believe in what you do. I quote Sarah Hagi, who says, "I wish upon you the confidence of a mediocre white man." And of course, this is a huge generalization, but generally men apply for positions when they fulfill only 60% of the criteria asked for, whereas women only apply when they fulfill 100%. So please don't fall into the so-called princess effect, where you wait for somebody else to see how amazing you are and your capabilities and give you that promotion. You need to go and get it yourself on your own right. You need to set your goals and then aim just a little bit higher. Secondly, and this is the most important thing to me, is empowerment. It's the single most powerful thing you can do to affect change and cause ripple effects in society around you. You need to support and especially be the catalyst for other women. You can do so, for example, by joining a mentor program, one at BNLF, or as well at our company Kona Club. Kona means woman in Icelandic. We're creating a global mentorship program to support young professional women, who we call the leaders of tomorrow, and connect them amongst peers, as well as to the executives from Kona's Executive Club. It's a group effort. And speaking of group, if you're a man, you need to step up your game for women. You need to promote them. You need to speak up for them. Stop sexist comments from other colleagues, and especially give them the floor. Don't interrupt women. We're all in this together. Feminism helps men and women equally. And so we need all the allies to be on the same side, men and women. Coming to the third point of connect, what I mean is we need to correct wrongful statements and behaviors. We need to do so to change perceptions. There's 3 dimensions to this: our own, the other, and the whole community. We have so many unconscious biases that we have to deal with. For example, when a man is being assertive, he's considered to be the boss. A woman with the same traits is bossy. A man is persuasive, whereas a woman with the same traits and arguments is pushy. A man who looks after his appearances is neat, and a woman is considered vain. It's difficult to tackle these issues, these biases, but the best way to do so, I find, is through questions. Next time you catch yourself not liking a woman, stop and ask yourself what precisely it is that you don't like. You need to second guess yourself in this regard. Ask yourself what you would think if she were a man. Don't ever use the term girl or woman to describe something negative or demeaning. If that happens to me, if somebody tells me, oh, you've done that, you do that like a girl, I thank them and tell them to keep up. Being a woman or a girl is amazing and powerful. The next step is the others. Once you've tackled your own unconscious biases, you can make changes in your environment. Call out biases when you see them. Stop making excuses for other people. Oh, she or he didn't mean it that way. We all know how incredibly powerful words are. We need to stop the negative ones right in their track. Remember that when you do so, you don't stand up just for yourself, your mother, daughter, or sister. You actually stand up for the half of the entire human race. If that's not enough, I don't know what is. Lastly, change your community. The best way to do so is vote. Use your privilege and vote women into local, regional, national elections. Give them the promotion. Help fellow women, co-workers get that promotion. Recommend them. Use your voice to lift up women. The question is, I get asked all the time, is can you really, as an individual, really make such big changes? And that's exactly 100% true. Where else does it start when not with the individual? Talking can transform minds, which can transform behaviors, which eventually transforms institutions. Every one of us is a leader. You have no idea what little thing you say or do today can have an impact down the line on how a woman or a man sees themselves or others. So I'll leave you with the words of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Culture does not make people. People make culture. If it is true that the full humanity of women is not our culture, then we can and absolutely must make it ours. We have to start doing this right now. It needs to start with you, and it needs to start with me, step by step and word for word. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhiana. That's a really fantastic presentation. And it's really apt for an organization like BNLF. Our women's organization, the network, has been in existence for a couple of years. And going forward, we will be starting a mentoring program to empower young girls, especially those who want to embark on a career in law. And, you know, lawyers, of course, do embark in politics. So, you know, who knows? When they engage with organizations like ours and see successful women, powerful women, it just gives them courage. And, you know, that has been my journey. If I didn't follow in the footsteps and get encouragement for people who paved the way, I certainly wouldn't have been in law. So I think not only for, you know, young girls, but generally for young people, these kind of messages are extremely important. So thank you so much, Rhiana, for that wonderful presentation and the film clip as well. Our next speaker, we are, you know, really privileged to have Her Excellency Claire Ireland. Claire Ireland is the Australian High Commissioner to Nigeria, and she'll be talking about women in politics. So a little bit about Her Excellency. She's actually the High Commissioner to the Federal Republic of Nigeria with accreditation to Benin, Cameroon, Gabon, Niger, and the Gambia. Ms. Claire Ireland has over 25 years of experience working in international development and foreign policy. She's also worked in over 20 countries across Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and the Pacific. Most recently, she served overseas as the Deputy Head of Mission at the Australian Embassy, Abu Dhabi, in 2018, and as Country Director for AusAid at the Australian Embassy in Hanoi. In Hanoi, she was responsible for Australia's AUD 110 million annual aid program. So I'm going to post the rest in the chat, but you know, it's really a great pleasure to have Her Excellency with us. And I was really proud to be part of the video that we shared about, you know, for this topic, going back to what you would tell your 12-year-old self. So anyway, without further ado, Her Excellency Claire Ireland, it's over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm feeling slightly old after that introduction, hearing that reflection. But thank you very much for inviting me to join this evening. It's a real honour to be here. It's a privilege to be serving here in Nigeria at the moment, but also to kind of extend out to the broader group and work with the broader community. I always find very interesting. And thank you too. I think the sequencing of the talks tonight has been very fortuitous. You know, I'm going to talk about women in politics, and it's just I wanted to share some reflections from my own time over the last 25 years working in my area. Whilst obviously I'm not a politician, but my bosses are. So I work, you know, as a public servant, as a civil servant, I'm working to the minister at the time, and very much in implementing what their kind of decisions are. So women in politics has been very much around me my whole life, even though I'm not obviously a politician myself. And I think what's so important about tonight's conversation and the sequencing of the speech or the discussion is very much that obviously, you know, it's the politicians who set the legal framework in terms of how we're operating and how our countries are, I guess, governed. And very much the issues we talked about in terms of gender-based violence and human rights, the legal framework for that is set by the politicians. And so very much, I guess I'm very passionate about that, you know, that you need to have an equal representation of women in those political positions to ensure that then those decisions about women are kind of grounded in the reality and have that kind of perspective. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of my conversation tonight. So I just wanted to kick off and share, I'm reading at the moment a really interesting book, and I will put a little plug for it. I don't know if any of you have come across it yet, but it's by Julie Gillard and Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. So Julie Gillard, she was the first female Prime Minister in Australia back in 2012. And obviously Ngozi, as all you would know, has been both a finance minister here, a foreign minister, and now is chair of Gavi, but also is down to 2 in terms of potential for the next Director General for the World Trade Organization. So you've got 2 incredibly high profile women who have written a book about women in leadership and particularly about politics, women in politics. And reading this book has really got my mind going about some of the challenges that really exist and continue to exist still. And that's what I just wanted to touch on a little bit tonight and go through some of those with you and share my reflections. But yeah, it's an interesting kind of combination of Australia and Nigeria together. And that's why I wanted to flag on that tonight. So the book, it's got a number of interviews, with Jacinda Ardern, Ellen Johnson-Sirleaf, Michelle Bachelet, Erna Solberg, Hillary Clinton, lots and lots of great politicians. So if you're interested, definitely have a read of that. But what it's done, this book has made me really reflect about my own upbringing and what has shaped me as an individual. And this is where I actually have a confession to make. So whilst I'm the Australian High Commissioner, I was born in the UK. So I grew up in South London, and I grew up in a single parent household where my mother brought up 2 young children. And it was my mum who was out on a daily basis, who was working, who was balancing that kind of home life, bringing up 2 children. And so all I saw growing up was a very sort of strong woman who was, taking on that role. And to me, that was my normal. And I have to sort of say here that my dad is a wonderful person and is a great person, and it wasn't that he wasn't part of our lives, but what I saw day to day growing up was a woman in a very strong leadership role who took on that role of bringing up the children. So my mum has been a very powerful influence on my life and how I think I've shaped to be. And that really goes to the heart of kind of, women in politics as well. So whilst my mum was a very young kind of divorced lady growing up in South London, she was very active and very engaged, and she set a very good kind of role model for us. So I remember my mum joining this group called the Stag Group, which was stood for Second Time Around Group. So it was for young people out there who were divorced, who had children, and who wanted to meet other people. But my mum, being my mum, wasn't just kind of, part of the group. She decided she wanted to kind of take on a very active role in leading it, and she was elected to be the chair of this group, and then she very much took on the role for sort of 5 years in that leadership role. So I guess it was just my reflection over the last kind of few weeks whilst reading this book, going around me, I've been very fortunate to have very strong women leaders, and particularly my mother has been that role model. Growing up in the UK in the 70s, whether you like her or not, Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister at the time, and so there was, again, in my kind of upbringing, a very strong woman character, a very strong woman leader in that leadership role, in a political role, who was very, very much driving kind of economic situation in the UK at the time. So for me, I kind of realized, whilst I was reading this book, that, I've been very lucky to have that. And I think I've grown up slightly naively to assume that that was the norm, and to assume that actually, anyone can do anything they like. And I've always been very supported by my mother to go out for it and try things. But I think as I've grown up, and certainly the time I've worked in development, I've realized that my reality as a child and the reality of the world was very different. And I think the facts speak for themselves and are very sobering. So today, only 1 in 4 parliamentarians globally are women, which I just find quite incredible. You know, back in the 70s when I was growing up, yes, there was a female prime minister. I assumed naively that that was just normal. The reality is that wasn't the case. A World Economic Forum study just done recently has highlighted that out of 3,343 ministerial positions in 153 countries, only 21% are held by women. And that study also went on to show that if we continue at the rate of changes we're doing now in terms of getting women into politics, it's going to take 95 years before we have equal amount of women and men in political positions. And I just find that staggering. And I find that that's not okay. I'm a mother of 3 children. I've got 2 teenage girls. And it really, you know, frustrates me and distresses me to think it could be 95 years before we get gender parity when it comes to politics. Why does that matter? Well, I think, you know, we've heard a lot about discrimination tonight, whether it's gender-based violence, whether it's human rights. And I think that's kind of the reason to me why it really matters, because unless you have equal representation in politics, you're never going to have the kind of implementation of policies and governing structures that affect all of us, particularly women, take into place. And I think that's really important, and therefore it's something we need to continue pushing for. In the last few years, certainly women in politics in Australia has been very, very challenging. I mean, Julia Gillard, who's written this book with Ngozi, she's a very impressive woman, but she was the first female prime minister in 2012. But she had a lot of attacks for being a woman, and she is pretty famous. I'm not sure if people have heard it, but there was a powerful speech she gave in Parliament and called her misogyny speech, where she spoke out against the abuse that she felt she had been getting from her male counterparts. And it's quite a, it's a famous speech, certainly in Australia now, and I know people talk a lot about it. And she really challenged the stereotypes that she was faced with. But her job was no doubt 10 times harder than any other person's job had been in Australian politics. And it's still quite brutal in Australian politics, I have to say. It's not very easy for women to survive. But I also know that that's the case here in Nigeria. And when I was very fortunate to participate in a webinar that Julia and Ngozi did recently on their new book, and one of the questions I asked Ngozi was, what advice would she give to young Nigerian girls starting out their careers and trying to encourage them to get into politics? And I could see the pain on her face when she was answering the question. And she just said, it's really tough in Nigeria. You've got to have a thick skin and you've got to be prepared for a lot of criticism. She reflected back that when she was in Parliament, about 33% of the ministerial positions were female. Now I understand that's down to about 20%. So it's not heading in a great direction in terms of gender parity. In terms of the states here, I think there's only one state which actually has gender parity in terms of governing positions, as there's still a long way to go. And so here Ngozi really talk about that challenge in a very painful way, made me realise, you know, we have got a long way to go. And here Osai speak out earlier on, you know, the gender-based violence has been really challenging here in Nigeria, particularly during the COVID crisis. It has been in Australia too, so I don't want you to think that Nigeria is, you know, unique. And I think it's something that we are all experiencing around the world. But yeah, it's a real challenge. I think, you know, whilst I talk about women in politics, there's not enough women in political positions, and the gender parity is going to take 95 years if we carry on as we're going. We need to kind of work fast to change that. It's important to remember it isn't just in politics, right? It's everywhere in our society, so in business as well. So of the top Fortune 500 in the US, only 6% of 6.6% of women of CEOs are women. And that's pretty similar with the FTSE 100 too in the UK. Only 6% of the CEOs are women. I mean, these are figures which are really sort of small. And these are, you know, businesses, top businesses making decisions about, you know, things that impact on all of our lives. And to not have that gender parity, again, I think really kind of undermines that or further perpetuates the discrimination. The same is true not just in business, but also in the news world. So 24% of persons heard, read or seen are women, only 24%. So out of all the news articles you read, or if you turn on the TV, you see a presenter, it's only 24% that will be a female who's written it or was speaking it. And in terms of news articles that are challenging gender stereotypes, the statistics are only around 4% of articles are out there challenging the stereotypes we're hearing. So it's, you know, it's a really challenging space, not just in politics, but also in business, in news, and I think also, you know, in science and in the media and like the like Hollywood and things like that as well. We're also seeing that movement, which some of the other speakers have talked about. So I'm conscious, you know, there's lots of other good speakers tonight. Let me just sort of wrap up in terms of my own reflections on where we're going and why it's, I guess, so important. And I think, you know, why am I so concerned that we need to have women in politics? And I think it goes back to the point at the start where I was talking about in terms of decision making. It's the decisions that are being made by our lives and the legal frameworks and the governing frameworks in terms of how we're living are set within the political sphere. And whilst in that political sphere, we don't have a balance of gender, we're going to get that unconscious bias that we've been hearing about tonight. It's just going to keep coming through. So for me, until we have that kind of equality in our women leaders that represent our countries, we're going to constantly challenge and be constantly struggling with those human rights issues that we've heard about. We're going to be struggling about the gender-based violence issues we've heard about. And I think that's what's really critical. So I think, you know, it's very significant, the discrimination against women and continue. I've been very privileged to work across the world. And I think, you know, in many countries I've worked, this is what we're hearing. And I think the longer we take to get that balance right, the longer the discrimination will continue. So let me wrap up there and hand back over to the speaker. But I think that's, for me, the context of why, in the legal context, the context of why these issues we've heard about tonight, the focus for me on getting women in leadership roles and women in politics is so critical. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Your Excellency. That was a really fascinating presentation. Women in politics. We have a lot of strong Nigerian women, and it's always amazed me why we don't have yet our first governor, for example. You know, let's not even get to president, but you know, we live in hope. With all the strong women we have in Nigeria, I just wonder why we haven't reached that stage. You know, Rwanda, you know, has done it, but you know, there's a way to go. In the legal profession, we are making waves, but still, there's a long way to go. If you look at the statistics, when it comes to the percentage of, you know, Black women in the judiciary, for example, or QCs, we are still, you know, at the end of the queue. So organizations like ours are very, very important, so that, you know, we have a voice. So please, let's continue with the pressure and have a voice and make sure that things move in the right direction. All right, thank you so much. I'm going to talk about our final speaker, who is a member of the British Nigerian Law Forum. She is Morayo Fagborun Bennett, a barrister at Hardwicke Chambers and a deputy district judge. She will be dealing with the topic of imposter syndrome and the role of positive action in climbing the ladder of success. Morayo is a specialist landlord and tenant and real property barrister with particular interest and experience as an advocate in discrimination cases. She's a graduate of philosophy and theology from St. Hilda's College, Oxford. She's been recommended as a social housing junior in Chambers UK and Legal 500 for many years. She is the author of Chapter 9, Hoarders and Nuisance Neighbours. She also, I just won't go through the whole thing, she is also the chair of the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee in her chambers. She is the social secretary of the British Nigeria Law Forum, and she is on the women's panel. As I said, she is also a fairly newly appointed deputy district judge. And we're going to post the rest of her profile in the chat. So, Morayo, it's over to you.
Thank you very much. Can everybody see the slides now?
Yes.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, so as I was saying, the first slide was all the reasons, all the things that you would point to and say, oh, she's succeeded. And then the second slide, if I can get my assistant to move on, some of the reasons that, you know, I give myself and that I feel sometimes like I'm a bit of a fraud in relation to this, and you don't feel quite so successful. It's really easy to acknowledge the efforts that I've made. So I'll say, well, I got there by working really hard, but much harder to say, well, I got there because I'm capable. You know, it's always, you know, it was a matter of luck, good timing, or effort. I don't know how many people here would say that I'm a perfectionist, you know, would agree with that assessment of themselves. Well, imposter syndrome is closely related to that pressure to perform at absolutely 100% in everything and not to feel competent unless you've managed to achieve that. And imposter syndrome can come out either when somebody is calling attention to your success, or if you're dealing with failure after a string of success. The next slide. So what is imposter syndrome? It's that feeling that you are a fraud. I remember when I went to Oxford University, and during the first term, I remember checking my pigeonhole, absolutely convinced that at some stage there would be a letter there saying, sorry, Miss Fagborun, we've made a mistake. That was for, you know, that should have been for somebody else. And it takes a while to sort of settle down and actually just sort of get yourself grounded and centered in relation to it. The next slide, please. So how common is it? Very. And one of the things that I like is when I'm talking to other people, in particular, women that I see as having succeeded, and they tell me that they have that feeling sometimes too, or that it's not always been easy, and the mistakes that they have made. I mean, it's been said in research that, you know, imposter syndrome can be more acute if you are different from your professional peers, whether that is in terms of race or sex or gender, disability, class or sexual orientation. So that feeling of difference can make that feeling of being an imposter more acute. It's the idea of the insecure overachiever. So moving on to the next slide. So if one of the reasons that researchers said that, that women get imposter syndrome is that sometimes they have a sibling or close relative who is designated as the intelligent one, whilst they're designated as the sensitive one or the more sociable one. Then, well, let's spread the love when we're dealing with girls and young women. Make sure that we are praising young women and girls for the effort that they have made and not just the output that results from that. That would help in relation to the first type of causation. Another cause that's often said in relation to women feeling imposter syndrome is that as a young girl, you're told that you're great at everything and how easily you do it. You get A's with no effort, you make friends so easily, it's all so easy for you. And once you, as a young girl or a young woman, start to experience difficulties, you start to find that actually getting an A isn't what you would call easy. You're actually having to put a lot of effort in. You start to internalize and say, well, I must be dumb because it's not easy for me. I'm having to work. So let's try and help our young girls and our young women by letting them realistically understand their strengths and their weaknesses. It's okay to work hard, and that the effort is what it is that we should praise. The next slide deals with overcoming imposter syndrome. Now, Natasha Shatunde has a great list of tips in her article, and I've put the link to that in about two slides' time. So, how do you feel grounded and centered? How do you start to feel comfortable in your own skin? How do you start to overcome imposter syndrome? Love yourself for who you are. Get some counselling to help with self-esteem. There's no shame in that. 2, be yourself. Be your authentic self. 3, acknowledge your achievements. Like I did in that second slide, write down your achievements. And that list will carry on growing. And then pat yourself on the back. 4, cut down the negative self-talk. When you find yourself thinking something particularly negative, take that thought to court. We're lawyers. What's the arguments in favour of it? What evidence is there for that viewpoint? What are the arguments against it? What evidence is there in relation to it? So if the negative thought is, I'm a failure, I am stupid, well, take that thought to court and see what you, as a judge, decide based on the evidence. And hopefully by following that process, you'll see that you'll see it for what it is. It's negative self-talk, and start to move on. 5, be kind to yourself and to others. 6, if you're faced with somebody that's rude or patronising, they cut you up, they're rude to you, they're arrogant in court, don't take it to heart. You don't know what it is that they're, what's going on in their life. And that behaviour, it's nothing to do with you. If it's serious misbehaviour by the person, complain about it. Otherwise, don't take it to heart and move on. 7, get a mentor. And now you've heard from other speakers about mentorship programs. There are a lot of schemes now for all different stages of the path, from pre-pupillage to pupillage to silk, judicial. 8, share your story. As I was saying, it's always great to talk to others and to hear them talk about their past mistakes and their feelings. 9, join a committee, volunteer for stuff, speak to other people. It's only by sharing that you can sometimes get a real sense of a real sense of perspective. And 10, create your own space if it doesn't exist. The next slide provides a list of resources. The next slide after that provides a list of resources. They're in the chat for if you want to follow up on some of those. So now I'm going to talk about what, if any, role can positive action play in helping girls and young women climb the ladder of success. The McGregor-Smith review said, every person, regardless of their ethnicity or background, should be able to fulfill their potential at work. That is the business case, as well as the moral case. Diverse organizations that attract and develop individuals from the widest pool of talent consistently perform better. So people aren't doing young girls and women a favour by giving them work or promoting them. There is a business case for it as well as a moral case. On the slide now, you'll see the figures from the Diversity at the Bar report that was published by the Bar Standards Board in January 2020. Out of the 13 Black pupils, there were 8 that were African, 3 Caribbean, and 2 other Black British. Of the 20 Silks QCs, 6 were African, 11 Caribbean, and 3 were from other backgrounds. So in answer to the next slide, is there a problem? Yes, there is. And both the Bar Council and the Bar Standard Board are well aware of this. On to the next slide. So positive action comes from section 158 of the Equality Act 2010. So organisations can take proportionate means of achieving the aim of helping people that share a particular characteristic to overcome a disadvantage that arises in connection with the protected characteristic. So we're talking about things like targeted advertisement, encouraging applicants from underrepresented groups, work experience, talks, meetings with mini pupilages for targeted specific group. The first bullet point is the pre-application judicial scheme on the slides you were on. And that is, I mean, I took part in that. They started that last year. And it's useful, especially if you don't come from a background in which you have family who are judges or you don't know very many judges. The course is led, the workshops are led by judges, and they give you an opportunity to start exploring things. The next slide has some links to mentoring opportunities at the bar and at the judiciary. The slide after that provides a link to shadowing opportunities. And the next slide starts to deal with what's called the equal merit provision, which comes from section 159 of the Equality Act 2010. Now, the scope of this is relatively narrow. It allows you to consciously favour candidates with a particular protected characteristic when you're faced with a tiebreaker situation in the context of recruitment and promotion. So it's not, well, it's not a case in which you are appointing an ethnic minority or a woman into a role just because they have that characteristic. It only arises when they are as qualified as each other. So it's a tiebreaker position. So, and it applies in relation to both pupillage and the judiciary users. And I put on the slide in front of you how that has been used over the last few years. And so that information is always available. The next slide deals with the issue of whether there is a stigma and whether that feeds that imposter syndrome, that fraud issue that we have talked about. And in relation to, at least the judiciary, you need to bear in mind what I've said, which is it's equal merit. It's a tiebreaker situation when this is applied. You're not getting it because you're Black. You're not getting it because you're a woman. But it is taking a positive step towards addressing an issue that has persisted despite all of the workshops, despite all of the positive action that has been taken. It is time to do something more in order to get things to change. And what I would say in relation to imposter syndrome is, it's time to stop saying, first of all, I didn't get it because I'm Black. And then when you do get it, I only got it because I'm Black and they needed to appoint a Black person. Maybe, just maybe, you got it because they recognize your ability and your potential. Turning to the last slide, thought I'd finish with what Natasha Shatunde would say. You've made it to the bar, you've made it to university. So now spread your wings, trust in your abilities, and be your authentic self. Thank you. I'm sure Seye is going to tell me off because I'm sure that was a barrister's 12 minutes as opposed to...
No, that's fine. That was just so engaging, Morayo. Thank you so much. I mean, it just goes to show it's so difficult to condense such an important topic into such a short time. Our journey, you know, well, you're on the bar side of it, I'm on the solicitor's side of it. Our journey is just so incredible. And, you know, the word Nigerian and imposter, I don't really think it goes, to be honest. You know, nobody can tell me I'm an imposter. By the time I give you that kind of look, you will know I'm not an imposter. And, you know, we heard recently about the young lady who was mistaken for, you know, who knows what, when she, you know, came into court. You know, she was a barrister. I've forgotten her name. Is it Alexandra Wilson or something? You know, being made to feel an imposter when you're, you know, going about your, you know, daily work, it's not our portion. It's not for us, but it still happens. And, you know, we have a voice at BNLF, and we have to make sure that we engage with, you know, the stakeholders of the profession and say, you know, it must not happen again. This must not continue to happen. So, you know, thank you for that presentation. As I said, at BNLF, we will be setting up a mentoring scheme. We have a new panel of women who will be part of this project, and some of them are here. And we will be sharing that in the next couple of weeks, what our program is, because mentoring is an important aspect, especially, you know, those who are experienced, those who are a step ahead of you. It's always good to get their take on, you know, what is happening in the profession and how you can move to the next level. So we've got a couple of minutes, and I know Rhiana has to go. I'm not sure whether she's still with us because she's got she's got a meeting coming up. But I give you the opportunity to ask any questions. And I think in the chat, I saw a question from Babatunde Akinyoju, one of our, of course, eminent past chairs, who has asked, are there domestic laws against sexual harassment in Nigeria? And I guess, Osai, are you there?
Yes, I am.
I don't know whether you saw that question in the chat. Are you able to talk about that?
Yes, I did. I actually responded in the chat just now, just as Morayo was finishing up. We don't have any sexual harassment law at the moment, but the Senate recently passed one for universities. But you require the House of Reps to also pass it, and then the president sign it before it becomes law. So not yet, and even when it gets passed, it's only going to focus on federal tertiary institutions. So we're hoping that we can get something that would be broader in the future. But creatively, in the case that involved this student at the Obafemi Awolowo University, the case of Monica, the ICPC, the anti-corruption body, used the Corruption Act to actually prosecute the professor, because they said asking for sex in place of grades was corruption, was extortion. So I think you can be a bit creative, and the professor was sentenced. He had a term of imprisonment imposed on him. So you never know. I think it would involve being able to look at what we have and how we can play with it for a while. The Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act is there. No one has tried to test the law to see whether we can push it, because this definition of violence is quite wide. And I think it should be able to capture sexual harassment. If you feel threatened, it affects you psychologically, mentally, physically, it should be violence and it should be punishable under the law.
Thank you, Osai. That is, really useful information. I think some states in Nigeria are better than others. Lagos is doing pretty well. It's for others to, follow that slightly better example. And, a lot of these cases need to be tested in the courts. And of course, you have the problem of delays and what have you. But we're making progress in Nigeria, but there's still a lot to be done.
Can I
now, yes, please do go ahead, Your Excellency.
Sorry, I just wanted to add as well, that's a really good question. And I think the other thing that Nigeria doesn't have yet, and so correct me if I'm wrong, is a gender equality bill, like the overarching framework to implement the CEDAW, the UN resolution. So we still don't have that gender equality overarching bill. I know there's been a lot of work over the last few years to try and push that through. And there's still work ongoing with UN Women here to try and support that. And it's certainly something that we, Australian High Commission and many diplomatic missions are trying to do here as well. It's to enable that overarching framework for gender equality, which is part and parcel of this as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of good work happening on the ground, but there's still a way to go.
Indeed, indeed. Any other questions? You could, raise your hand in the reaction button so I can see you. My eyesight's not very good these days, but I can't see anybody raising their hand. Have I missed anything in the chat? No, I'm not sure whether I missed anything in the chat. Any other questions? No, that's good. Excellent. Mojisola, can I put it over to you, please?
Yes, hello. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mojisola Olabinjo, and I am also a member of the BNLF Women's Network. So I would like to say thank you to all the speakers. It's been great listening to everyone, especially being a young Nigerian, and with everything that's going on, it's just really inspiring to have heard everyone, all the speakers speak today. So just a bit of housekeeping. The BNLF Women's Network will be starting a mentoring scheme for women and girls in law or interested in law. We'll be in touch soon, so those who are interested in being potential mentors and mentees can contact us at our email address, which has already been included in the chat. So all information on membership of BNLF is also in the chat and on our website. Also, to everyone who has attended today's event, you can receive a free e-copy of Michelle Obama's Becoming if you request for it by sending an email to the Women's Network email address, which is also linked here. So thank you everyone once again for attending, and to all the speakers today. Thanks for organizing this share. And thanks to WorldRemit, the money transfer company, for supporting today's event. The competition ends tonight, so take part if you're interested in. The link is also being attached to the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a real great pleasure having you with us for and supporting women. And I was so pleased to see that we had a number of men with us. And you're always very supportive. For the British Nigeria Law Forum Women's Group, sort of key event has always been International Women's Day. And unfortunately, this year, the International Women's Day was actually one of our last live events until, you know, it was live as, you know, we've never seen before with COVID-19. And, you know, this has affected young girls in particular. You know, unfortunately, during this period of COVID-19, we've had an increase in domestic violence. So we've really got to be not only, you know, on the alert and safe, we've actually, you know, as men and women in society, we've got to, you know, look out and, you know, make sure that we are observant and look out to see whether we are suspecting that anybody is being subjected to any form of domestic violence or abuse. So as the head of the BNLF Women's Network, I just want to say thank you once again to all the speakers, to our sponsors, WorldRemit. I want to say thank you. Do look out on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. If you like the event, we always love the plug. If you are a lawyer and you are not yet a member of BNLF, please look on our website, look into joining us. We do have members in Nigeria and in the UK, of course. And we will be in touch over the mentoring programs. We'll be looking for mentors and mentees. If you have young girls in particular who may have an interest in law, please let them get in touch with us at the address we've given out for WLN@bnlf.org.uk. And if you're a potential mentor yourself, also you know, get in touch with us or we will get in touch with you. And when it comes to mentoring, it's not just young girls. Even I'm looking for a mentor as well. So, you know, you're at different levels where you perhaps may need mentorship. So don't be shy, do come forward. So once again, on a final note, we're at the end of our session. I want to say thank you for joining us. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having all the wonderful speakers who actually signed up, you know, very last minute. I just want to thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you. Keep safe wherever you are. We've got, you know, quite an international field here, so it was really good to see you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.